It was 2007, and I was looking at a copy of Da Vinci's Last Supper when it occurred to me. Why are their heads bunched together like that? In spaced out clusters, 4 groups of 3, or the 4 seasons of the year, to be exact. That's when I realized that because of preconceived beliefs, up until then, I had seen the painting, but had never really seen it. And that meant that Da Vinci was secretly sharing something about Christianity with a select audience, and in a way that would remain over the heads of conventional Christian thinkers. Which makes the Last Supper a Renaissance-era Easter egg. Like any good Easter egg, if you know, you know. But if you miss it, well, you have no idea just how much you've missed. After this video, those not already in the know may never look at this painting or Christianity the same way again.
What you talking about, Willis?
The 12 apostles are the 12 months of the year, the 12 tribes of Israel, and the 12 signs of the zodiac. Have you ever heard of King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table? Yeah, it's that too.
On second thoughts, let's not go to Camelot. It is a silly place. Right.
So these guys are actually these guys. And in this painting, Da Vinci provides the viewer sufficient clues to his belief in the astrotheological, a subject that the conventional church, generally speaking, won't touch with a 10-foot pole. The painting starts off with Aries, or March, not January, because the ancient older cultures oriented their calendars to align with the life cycles of man and nature. They viewed life as something that starts in the fertile, emerging season of spring, not the cold, dead month of January. There are models by other researchers and authors that translate the Last Supper from right to left. I've dug a bit into their rationale for this, and in my opinion, it's incorrect. I believe that the Last Supper should be read from left to right.
You're going the wrong way! He said we're going the wrong way!
Oh, he's drunk! How would he know where we're going?
Yeah, how would he know? Thank you, thanks a lot.
That being said, I could be wrong and have no problem admitting it. So, consider this an independent theory or translation of Da Vinci's Last Supper, but one that attempts to tie up as many loose ends as possible. In this translation, we will be going from left to right because there seems to be a greater amount of visual evidence in support of reading it this way. So from left to right, we have Aries all the way down to Pisces. Seated in the middle is Jesus, the Sun, or Sun, S-U-N, whose ecliptic path divides the year between spring and summer and fall and winter. Or, to be literal, the annual rise and fall of the sun. That's why this is called the Last Supper, a concept we're all familiar with in the form of the prisoner getting his last meal. It's also the story of the 4 seasons and the yearly figurative death of the sun, that always returns or resurrects following the darkest hours of winter, which are symbolic of its decline and death. Every Christmas, or Christ Mass, we celebrate and glorify the return of the newborn king, and we should, because that sun, the one that we can see with our eyes, quite literally saves our backside every day and every year, whether we acknowledge it or not. What follows is speculation. There are a lot of different takes on who's who in this painting. The one and most important thing that symbologists and astrotheologists agree on regarding this painting is that the people in it are symbolic of the zodiac. What follows is an independently considered translation of the painting using visual evidence that will explain, when it can, why the names assigned to these characters were chosen. You can accept or reject the assumptions. From left to right, we have the 3 months of spring, summer, followed by the sun, and then the fall and winter. Again, notice how the heads are clustered in groups of 3. You can solve this painting like you do a puzzle, one piece at a time and in no particular order. Like a jigsaw or crossword puzzle, the more you can pin down the easy and obvious stuff, the easier it is to fill in the not-so-obvious blanks by process of elimination. Since we know the calendar, as soon as we can identify 2 or more of Jesus' pals, we can identify the rest by order. The most obvious one in the bunch is VIRGO. Symbolically, VIRGO is the virgin or maiden, and of everyone at this table, this one most looks the part. Virgo happens to be the 6th sign of the zodiac, and DaVinci has seated her in the 6th position from the left. So already we have two things going for us: the feminine appearance of this character and his or her seat number matching its zodiacal number.
Wait! There's more!
Numerologically, 6 is also associated with the feminine, while 9 is associated with the masculine.
Okay, so let's all open up our Reading is Fun books to page 69.
69.
The numbers 6 and 9 complement each other in the same way that Yin and Yang do, two symbols that look like their numerical equivalents. After reading Dan Brown's hit novel, The Da Vinci Code, some 20 years ago, like a lot of people, I was intrigued by that book's idea that apostle number 6 was actually Mary Magdalene from the Bible. Obviously, that can't be the case unless Mary Magdalene is also a Virgo, which, to my understanding, she is not.
It's called scotoma. The mind sees what it chooses to see.
Who is she?
Of all these apostles or signs, this one is by far the one that most looks like a woman. That being said, there are a few other apostles, 5 to be exact, that Da Vinci has applied some feminine attributes to. This is because the signs of the zodiac are polarized by their masculine or feminine energetic orientation. The second most obvious apostle we can identify is Mr. Balance himself, Libra. This one was identified for me in a presentation by Santos Bonacci about 15 years ago, so credit goes to him. Libra is the scales, and it doesn't take a fine arts major to see that this person's posture stands out among the rest as depicting its zodiacal counterpart. If you remove Jesus from the count, since he's not one of the apostles, Libra appears to be sitting in position number 7, even though his head is in position number 8. This is a really important point. Da Vinci has pulled a little trick in 2 places in The Last Supper, where 2 different sets of apostles appear out of order by having their necks cross. The neck crossings happen with June and July, and September and October. All you have to do is look at where their heads are positioned relative to where their butts would be seated. It's not a huge hurdle, but it does confuse things a bit. Numerologically, Libra, being at position number 7, is also no accident. 7 could be said to represent balance, and among numerologists, it's said to represent completion. Going even deeper, I consider 7 as better understood as S even, or the balancing of polar energies, with S standing as a prefix for energy, and even meaning even. Just some symbolic numerological food for thought. The more you consider and meditate on numbers and letters, the more you'll notice interesting things about these characters and why they look the way they do. The third and final easy to spot apostle is the often maligned Judas, who is associated with Scorpio the Scorpion, a sign that starts in late October. Before I reveal it, can you spot which of these guys would best represent a stingy little scorpion? If you guessed this guy, you're right. This is Judas Iscariot, the man who betrayed Jesus in the Bible and consigned him to his doom. If you wanted to speak on this astronomically, it just means that as the sun passes the Scorpion constellation each year, it serves as a kiss of death to Jesus, God's beloved Son in the sky. Credit to the late Jordan Maxwell for sharing this idea. Metaphorically or symbolically, this event could be creatively viewed as a betrayal, but in reality, it just means that when the sun passes the scorpion-shaped star cluster each year, it's not long before winter or the season of death. Thanks a lot, Judas. With these 3 pinned down, let's fill in the rest by order of months and see if things hold up. Starting with Aries, or March, I don't have much to offer by way of observation, but as I write this, it occurs to me that the colors are our clue here. March is the start of spring, and Aries, which I speculate to be the Apostle Simon, is dressed in blue and green, which could suggest the thawing of ice to water and the slow return of grass and plant life. That may be a bit of a stretch, but there's no harm in speculating, and it happens to be a lot of fun. Also, remember that this guess gets some support from the 3 previous more evidence-based guesses behind Virgo, Libra, and Scorpio. Next we have the month of April, which means Taurus the Bull, or St. Jude, aka the Apostle Thaddeus. Visually, once again, there's not much to go on here. but a quick internet search identifies Thaddeus as often being depicted with a flame above his head. That flame is said to represent the descent of the Holy Spirit on the day of the Pentecost, which happens annually following Easter, and that fact supports where he's sitting chronologically. To the right of Taurus, we have the month of May, which is Gemini, represented symbolically as a set of twins, which makes this one very easy to identify because of the two upright hands meant to represent it. Santos Bonacci pointed out this slam dunk clue as well. Going further, the Bible suggests this is the Apostle Thomas, known as Doubting Thomas, over his initial disbelief of Jesus' resurrection, a biblical event that would have occurred around this time of the year. June is next, but because we have our first neck crossing, the head is out of position, so it's this guy here, not my Afro-Jewish looking brother with the tan. As far as I know, my take on this apostle is original, but I wouldn't be surprised if other researchers notice some cool visual clues here as well. And I'd love to know how many others have noticed that this depiction of the zodiacal Cancer, or crab, was given quite a fitting posture. Clues point to this being the Apostle Philip, and his low, slumped-over posture suggests a lowly, crawling thing. Others have claimed that this is actually a sneaky, plotting Judas because of the knife in his hand. I disagree. I think this is meant to represent a crab's pincers, and if you look at his second hand to the right, it's shaped and positioned like one. While I can certainly see a case being made for this guy as Judas visually, it doesn't make sense sequentially. That being said, I may be wrong, and I'm open to being corrected, provided a sufficient alternative. July gives us Leo the Lion, which would be the Apostle James, James the Great, or Elder specifically. There's not much here that says lion. My best guess isn't based on much, beyond July typically being the hottest month, when the sun is at its annual peak, and would be more likely to cause tanned or darkened skin. I mean, being real, which of these guys seems least likely to get a home loan?
Take it easy on the brothers, aight? The brothers!
We covered this apostle at the beginning, and the upshot is this. This one most clearly resembles a female. I would theorize this apostle is Matthew based on a process of elimination, combined with the consideration that, among other things, he was a tax collector, a point I'll elaborate on later in the video. To the right of JC, we have our second set of cross necks, and the other two easy to identify zodiac signs of Libra and Scorpio, or in this case, Scorpio and Libra. In case you missed it earlier, this guy is Libra the Scales. On top of the obvious pose he's been given, he's also dressed in a solid green, which is a chromatic representation of balance along the limited red-blue spectrum. If you haven't watched the Channel 11 video on Yoda and color in Star Wars, I'd recommend checking it out. It's fun, and hey, it's Star Wars. I speculate that Libra is the Apostle John. We'll touch on that more toward the end of the video, which features a 6-column translation table of this painting, The Last Supper. With apologies to Chris Rock, everyone doesn't hate Chris. Everyone hates Judas. The guy's like a literal prick. Or is that figurative prick? It's figurative. Anyway, this one is so obvious, it's almost overkill to point out how his elongated index finger is meant to symbolize the striking tail of a scorpion. A few months ago, I decided to watch 1973's Jesus Christ Superstar. I'd never seen it, and went in hoping it would be loaded with symbolic clues pointing to some of the many astrotheological goodies in the Bible. It did not disappoint. And the depiction of this guy, Judas, is just further proof that the people making our movies have a keen eye for esoteric detail and love including it.
One of my 12 chosen will leave to betray me.
Cut out the dramatics, you know very well. To think I admired you, well now I despise you!
You liar, you Judas!
Becoming symbolically literate is one of the best things you can do to protect yourself from being moved and psychologically manipulated against your will. When you can understand the things being said to you, or better yet, about you, you make it a little bit tougher for people to play games with you.
Sanguinarius homo indomitus est. Et sempedicens mentatium.
Ego nunquam pronunciare mentatium. Sed ego sum homo indomitus. Ou en français, si vous préférez.
Apostle number 9 is the month of November, and things are starting to get really dark and cold for our heroes, the Sunny, Son of God, or JC and the Sunshine Band. I'd speculate that Sagittarius is the Apostle Peter. Sags is represented by the zodiacal archer. And if you think getting stung by a poisoned bug will dampen your spirits, Try taking an arrow to the heart just in time for Thanksgiving. Refamiliarizing myself with this painting last week, I noticed that the way his hand is positioned and folded looks kind of similar to an archer drawing a bow. Admittedly, this might be a bit of a stretch. It certainly isn't as obvious as Gemini, Libra, or Scorpio, but it could be something. As we head down the home stretch, process of elimination makes easier work of our last three. Apostle number 10 has us in the month of December, approaching the death season and the darkest time of the year. My best guess for Capricorn is that it's the Apostle Andrew. As far as visual clues to its zodiacal counterpart, Capricorn is the goat head, and one of its distinguishing features are its elongated horns. Of the 12 disciples here, this guy's arms are the most elongated, and might be meant to suggest those horns. Admittedly, this is highly speculative, and might be purely coincidental. It's at least one of the weaker visual arguments being made among the 12. But we are also close to the close of the jigsaw puzzle here, and a lot of the pieces seem to fit. Numerologically, something really interesting regarding the zodiacal sequence is encoded here. It's worth noting because it's subtle, but it will further change your understanding of reality. One of the most basic of numerological principles is that the number 11 represents new beginnings. This is because while we can have any range of numerical sequences from 0 to 100 to a Googleplex and beyond, we are limited to the 10 singular Arabic numeric characters to express them. After number 9, we kind of have to cheat by adding additional slots in order to continue to express larger figures. The alternative would be to create an infinite number of distinct characters to express anything beyond 9. No thanks. But this also means that the number 10, symbolically and logically, represents the second occurrence of 0, or the black gate of life and death, or formless existence. And 11 is another way of expressing the second instance of the number 1. 12 is the second instance of 2, and so on. Understanding this is understanding why 11 represents the new guard, the rebirth, or the next generation. There was a certain event that happened in September, 23 years ago, on the 11th day of that month. The name that was chosen for that event was actually branding and marketing for a new political and social order that succeeded in getting people to accept certain ideas regarding civil rights as antiquated and old school, or belonging to an older order. The first number of that date represented things as they existed before, the good old days. And the second 2 digits that followed it were intended to represent the idea of a new beginning. You might recall a slogan that sounded kind of like, "Whiny Devon changed everything." It was said over and over by politicians and pundits during the time in question, and every time it was repeated, it was kind of like casting a spell. If you happen to remember that expression, now you know what it meant, numerologically speaking, and what it was intended to accomplish in the minds of the public. Now let's get back. In Aquarius, the 11th sign of the zodiac, our symbolic sun, Jesus, finds himself in the month of January. He has already passed through the symbolic void of December, the 10th month, or the second void through which he is born again. This is the start of the new year, and is why every year following Christmas, we celebrate the return of the King. When you happen to consider Jesus as that life-saving, glowing orb in the sky, the resurrection doesn't just happen approximately 2,024 years ago. It happens every year.
This day does not belong to one man, but to all. Let us together rebuild this world, that we may share in the days of peace.
Based on this painting, either Da Vinci knew this too, or he left us a series of really cool coincidences. By the way, this view needn't necessarily replace the view of a personalized or humanized Jesus, but it does require tweaking certain dogmatic beliefs about the nature of Christ and Christianity. We aren't left with much symbolic visual proof for either of our final 2 apostles, but we do have a gray, long-haired gentleman sitting in apostle spot number 11, and he is historically depicted as having long hair quite frequently. The hair lengths will be discussed in the addendum at the end. They provide a tiny bit of evidence as to who's who in the Last Supper, But in and of itself, the hairstyles are not a great argument either way. There are 2 apostles named James, and it's speculated widely that Apostle 11 is the Apostle James the Lesser. The final apostle, in the final month, starting in February, is Bartholomew. We can arrive at this by process of elimination if we're satisfied with the evidence supporting the others. Bartholomew is depicted here as having a bald head. A quick online image search produces images of Bartholomew having short hair most frequently, a bald head less frequently, and least frequently, full long hair. This also is not the sturdiest of foundations from an evidence standpoint, but it will have to suffice. This concludes this portion of the video. The addendum will include additional considerations and slides.